Hello, I'm delighted to share with you this interview that I recorded with Irene Lyon, who is a nervous system specialist. And what we covered in the interview is healing from trauma, specifically from the viewpoint of being the family scapegoat, with the particular complex childhood trauma that the family scapegoat experiences. And at the beginning, Irene goes into depth about exactly what the nervous system is. There's a few different branches of it. There's a few different things to know about it. And for the rest of the interview, we are discussing the fight, flight, freeze response. So in particular for us as the family scapegoat, we are healing from a deep freeze response, which is our nervous system goes into that deep freeze response. So Irene is the person to help us to come out of that, to heal our biology and our physiology, and to also have the cognitive understanding of it. So Irene was absolutely pivotal for me for my recovery journey. Back in 2017, I took her Smart Body, Smart Mind 12-week course and continued to study that course for the last 6.5 years. Also, it really helped me come out of a deep freeze response that I was in, and subsequently then helped me to go no contact with the gang of abusers that were in my life at the time, which are no longer in my life. So I'll put links below this video to Irene's resources, Irene's website. She has a plethora of educational resources on her social media, on her website. You won't be stuck for any education there. I do recommend her free 3-part training, which I'll have a link to below this. Also, disclaimer, and for transparency, I am an affiliate for Irene's Smart Body, Smart Mind. And that means that if you sign up to her training or purchase her Smart Body, Smart Mind course, I do receive a commission on that. And also, if you do that, you do get another bonus because you get 3 months access to my Scapegoat Child Recovery membership as well. So lots of benefits all around and a win-win situation for all. So I hope you enjoy the interview and get a lot out of it, and let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much. Oh, one more thing to add. When we were recording on Zoom, and this was really annoying afterwards, we were recording and it was side by side on my screen. I really did think I hit the right button, but when I went to the recording afterwards, it was speaker view, which means we're not side by side if you're watching it. And apologies if that is annoying. It's annoying for me. So just wanted to say that as well. Thanks. Hello, I am delighted to welcome my guest today, Irene Lyon, one of the top trauma people on the planet and the best trauma educator on the entire planet as well, and also has worked with the best trauma specialists on the planet. So you're very welcome, Irene.
Hi, Mary. Thank you very much. I have been blessed to work with top people. You're right.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Peter
I am
Levine, Kathy
Kathy
Kain.
Kain, Steve Terrell.
Yeah.
I feel like I came into the world at the right time to get them when they were at their prime.
Yeah.
And that's a blessing. If there is ever one, that is definitely one.
I know. One of my taglines is, because I'm help people heal from the family scapegoat. And I say there's never been a better time in the history of humanity to heal from the role of the family scapegoat.
Of course.
And it's
Of
kind of
course.
similar to your work as well. So you're a nervous system specialist and helping people heal. And we are at a particular time in the history of humanity where there's a certain amount of elements that are coming together, which make it very feasible for people to do this work and to do this healing.
Mm-hmm. I always say to various folks when I'm on interviews and talking, and even to students when I'm teaching, were our parents doing what you and I are doing right now? Probably not, talking about healing and the nervous system. And it's no one's fault, really. It's just that, there is a natural progression of expansion of ideas, tools. I mean, back in my grandmother's day, there was no electricity. My mother's day, there was no running water, where she lived.
Yeah.
And so there is this progression, just like back in those days, if they wanted to learn about their nervous system, they couldn't even find it because the information wasn't there in the 1930s or the early 1900s.
Exactly.
So when you really think about the progression of humans and humanity and how we've evolved and domesticated things and all those things, we are in a really interesting time, I think. Because we actually understand what trauma is. We understand how to heal it. And people, not everyone, of course, but there are many people interested in healing these past wounds, our wounds, so that we don't keep repeating all the things that were bad that occurred to us.
Exactly. Yeah. And just to go back, so you are a nervous system specialist. So just to bring everything back, can you tell us, like, what is the nervous system? And we talk about nervous system dysregulation or nervous system regulation. What is all of that about?
Good question. Well, if we just start with the nervous system, and yes, I call myself a nervous system specialist, a practitioner. We're at the point in time, Mary, where there's no real equivalent in my world, at least, the way there'd be like a medical doctor. Like everyone knows what a medical doctor is, or a surgeon, and everyone even knows what a lawyer is, or a school teacher, those sorts of things. But in the work that I am in and my predecessors are in, I mean, if we think of Peter Levine and these people, they were charting territory that had never been charted. And so I use the term nervous system specialist expert in the best way to just describe, yes, I work with the nervous system, and it's really complicated, and this is where we're at. So in essence, there are many nervous systems, right? So there isn't just one. So if I do a real quick, science-y breakdown of our biology, everybody knows we have a brain, I hope, and we have a spinal cord, right, that goes through our vertebra all the way to, the bottom of our tail. And the brain and the spinal cord is technically called the central nervous system, right? Because it's in the center. And then there is something called the peripheral nervous system. And that is all the nerves, which are tissue that come out of the brain and out of the spinal cord. And so if you were to it's actually kind of fun. If someone hasn't seen what that looks like, just Google, autonomic nervous system, peripheral nervous system, and you'll see these images of nerves, snaking out of the spine and going to the limbs, right? I have a glass of water here. I pick that up because my brain is sending signals to my peripheral nervous system to reach, to feel, to grasp. It's not hot, so I can touch it. So sensation is part of our peripheral nervous system. I'm looking at you. I can see a light in your background. I can also see I'm controlling my movement. That is all part of our peripheral nervous system. I can control that. I can, if I could say, Mary, let's play a little dance with our hands. If you wanted to play with me, you could also do some movements with your hands, and that's all being dictated by our nervous systems. The other part of our nervous system, there's more than one more, the autonomic nervous system. So this is one that I think when people say I'm healing my nervous system, they're referring usually to that.
Yeah.
And that has two parts. So that has the part that governs all of our autonomic functions. So we sit here and my heart beats without me having to think it. Same with yours, you know, like it's a given. I know that your heart is beating, you're breathing, and you're not having to think that.
Yes.
And that's because the autonomic nervous system does that. If you had just had your dinner or a piece of toast, you don't have to think about digesting that food. It does its thing, just like if I were to have a drink of water, it goes down. If it got hot like warm in here, I might start to get a little red to dissipate heat. I might sweat, or if it's cold, I might shiver. So all of these things, the autonomic nervous system governs.
Okay.
The other portion of the autonomic nervous system is our survival. And this is the one that we like to work on when we know we have trauma stuck in our bodies, when there is what we call dysregulation. And I'll throw out some more fancy terms. There's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. I think a lot of people have heard of these, but they might not know exactly what they mean. So the sympathetic, again, part of the autonomic nervous system, it's what we would call the fight, flight. And that is responsible for us staying safe if there's something coming at us really fast and we jump out of the way, or we have to run away from something, you know, the classic, oh, there's something coming, I better cover my head or jump out of the way. Or a more classic example, most people here have, you know, been chopping something with a knife in their kitchen and the knife drops accidentally. What do? You jump back. All reflexive, that is all automatic, and that's the sympathetic nervous system keeping us safe. The parasympathetic nervous system, we would call that the slowing down nervous system. But it's confusing because there's more than one branch. I know you've learned this through my courses, but there's many complexities to the parasympathetic. One is rest digest. So let's say you and I have a piece of toast and a cup of tea, and then we're chatting, we're talking about a funny movie or, you know, travel, something light and easy. We will go into rest digest because we're at ease. There's no threat, you know, you're safe. We're in a cozy place. The heat's on. We're hanging. We're chilling. Rest digest, parasympathetic. But then there's another portion of the parasympathetic, and that governs the freeze response, So I said earlier, fight, flight, and then freeze. Freeze is also slowing us down, but it slows us down in a kind of clumsy, quick way. And that would be something really intense happens. Let's say I can't fight, I can't flee. This happens to children all the time in bad situations, to go back to the scapegoat thing. They don't like it. They can't fight because they're little. They can't flee because if they do, they got no shelter, nothing. So they shut down, they freeze. And that is a complex process, but essentially it's a preservation of them. It's so that they don't feel the sympathetic. It's so that they don't feel the emotions that might connect with, I don't like this. I don't like what that person is saying or what that person is doing. And so we start to disconnect. We start to freeze. If that stays on too long, eventually the system is like, I can't maintain this diligence of protection. I'm going to use my body posture to show this. And for those that are just listening, what I'm doing is I'm going to sink. I'm going to collapse. I'm gonna just be really small. And if I can be really small, no one's gonna pay attention to me. And I'll just be ignored. And it's better to be ignored than to be screamed at, for example. So this autonomic nervous system that governs not just the digestion and all the things I mentioned, also governs our survival of fight, flight, and freeze. And what occurs in the human system, because we have these higher brains of ours, right? We can continue to live in this state of survival for a long time. But eventually, as you get older, and I'm finding that this is happening younger and younger in populations, is we get sick. Because when the fight, flight, and freeze is the main priority of the autonomic nervous system, what occurs is the system stops taking care of the gut. It stops taking care of the immune system, the hormones. It can't do the upkeep of the cells, the bone. If you're always in collapse, there's no desire to go outside and walk and be in the sunshine, and there's no interest in making good food for ourselves or connecting with people. So we just become really these survival beings based on circumstance, because we typically, we could say a humanity in the Western world, we aren't taught how to come out of survival. Animals in the wild, well, they come out of survival or they don't survive, if depending on where you are in the hierarchy of the animal kingdom, you might be someone's lunch. And so, then it's done. And then, but if there is a stress, if there is a trauma in the wild, that they don't have, these other animals don't have the higher brain that keeps them stuck in the same way, typically. So that is a very long way of saying this is what the nervous system is. It isn't just one thing. It's a conglomeration of nerves and bundles and sequencing pathways that help us basically survive, help us engage with the world. And when that nervous system is co-opted to more survival, the other processes kind of fall behind. And this is also the true for the central nervous system. The brain cannot function well if the system is constantly in survival.
That's it.
Right?
That's a brilliant, a brilliant comprehensive explanation.
Great.
Thanks very much for sharing all that and mapping it out for us. So for us as the family scapegoat, what you say there, so the nervous system ties in with the fight, flight, freeze response. And as you explained, like we will know as the family scapegoat that we can't, when we were a child, we couldn't fight back. It was too dangerous. We couldn't run away. That was not an option. So it's that freeze response that most of us as the family scapegoat will be dealing with. And 100%. That gets set up in childhood and affects and impacts our life all the way through. So as we're an adult recovering and learning about, oh my God, I was the scapegoat, this is what we'll be dealing with, this freeze response. And I think you describe it as having the brakes on and the accelerator on at the same time. So it's very, very taxing to our system. Yes. And that analogy, the gas is the fight flight. So it's revving, it's wanting to fight, it's wanting to flee, but it can't. And so the brake is breaking that survival physiology, but it's still there. And so this is the part that makes it seem, Mary, like not a lot of people in the world have dysregulation because they have so much freeze on top of the survival stress of fight flight that I'm fine. I'm fine. And that will be known as functional freeze. And they'd be just able to adapt so well. Oh, I can hold down a job. I can do all the other things in life, but they don't realize what's happening underneath. So for the family scapegoat in this freeze response, the type of things that a person would know that they have this freeze response, would they be things like lack of boundaries, people pleasing, fawning, dissociation, living life from a place of fear and mistrust, not feeling emotions, repeating toxic relationships, and limiting beliefs such as I'm worthless, and low self-esteem, lack of neuroception, to use one of your, and lack of gut intuition. That's a huge thing. If a person doesn't have gut intuition, how do they distinguish red flags? They can't.
right? We can't. And this is the crux is we need to, but again, because the system is so shut down to internal processes, and maybe that's one thing I'll mention is when we have this gas on, brake on, and we're living in what's technically called dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system, our capacity to feel our insides is thwarted. It's not accurate.
Yeah.
So a simple example would be we might not notice that we're hungry, or we might not notice that we're full. It can go both ways.
Yeah.
We might not notice that we're tired, or we might not notice that we have to move and get our blood going. We become in many ways numbed to our own physical, biological processes, but because our emotions are sparked via sensation in our organs.
Wow.
They're not coming from the brain. We interpret them in the brain with reason and thought and meaning. But, someone would say there's butterflies in my stomach. I've got a frog in my throat. I mean, our culture has different ways of actually expressing this survival stress. It feels like there's a knife in my back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
These are all sensations of the physical system. And so if we're in this functional freeze situation, we can interpret them. And we need those to be able to sense the world around us, as you mentioned, that neuroception.
Yeah.
Which is the perception of danger, but it's also the perception of safety.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. If you can't think that, say, for example, a person, if they are a safe person and they do have your best interests at heart, but you're perceiving them as, oh, they're out to get me. How do you live in the world like
it's
that?
Very difficult.
Yeah.
And then it takes tons of energy to try to cognitively figure it out. Whereas, and this is why I think a lot of people end up being so fatigued, because when you are in harmony and in sync with your insides, it's called your interoception, the perception of your internal environment, and you're actually living and grooving and flowing with your interoception and your perception. Life actually is quite, I don't want to say it's not a piece of cake, but it's easier than living with this biological burden of survival, where we're having to figure it out cognitively, and we're still not sure. It makes decision-making processes very, very, very difficult because it's not coming from that gut. A lot of people say, go with your heart. Really, it's the gut you want to listen to.
Yeah. And then people will say, for us as the family scapegoat, like the advice in positive psychology, go with your gut, and you're there. I don't know
perception
if I have
of
access.
it. Yeah, exactly.
I want to go back to when you say about emotions. So which comes first, thoughts or emotions? Is it a chicken and eggs?
Sensation comes first.
All the time.
Well, if we think of the baby like a newborn human, it's coming viscerally. So they cry because they feel something internal that's off. They're hungry, they're cold, they feel a fear. It's not, they're not thinking it, they're feeling it. Just like if you have a rumble in your tummy because you're hungry, or your bladder has pressure, it means you have to go to the bathroom. That's a sensation internally. And so if we think of just the evolution of how a human is evolved from birth, they're not coming out thinking, they're coming out sensing. And it's pure sensation. There's very little emotion yet, right? A baby won't be like, oh, I'm kind of feeling sad today, or I'm feeling angry. It's that they're either connecting and in a good, chill, rest, digest space, or engaging, or they're sleeping, or playing, curiosity, engaging, or they're in some form of distress. And the purpose of a good caregiver with an infant is to watch these signs of distress. And when they come up, the fancy word is attune to them, attuning to them, And oh, little one is hungry, little one is scared, little one doesn't like the position they're in. Oh, the moment I put socks on her, she started to cry. Maybe she doesn't, maybe her feet are actually quite warm. Listening to these cues biologically and then offering feedback, attunement, that is what creates what we would call self-regulation through co-regulation. But in instances where there is the family scapegoat, chances are there's some toxicity in that family due to trauma and dysregulation. And so little one isn't getting their needs met, right, from the very beginning. And then that continues into childhood, teenagehood, even in adulthood. And there's this constant defense, of body, of sensation. And so to go back to your question, what comes first, thoughts, emotions, it really is sensation. And then as we grow older, we feel the emotion. We might be angry, or we might be sad, or we might feel shame is not an emotion. People think it is, but it's actually a physical somatic sense. But we feel these things. And then because of this sophisticated higher brain, it can actually get us in trouble because we try to overthink it. We try to overanalyze it. And as you know, in doing this somatic work, it's actually about going in and sensing, feeling, and then letting the thoughts interpret it after we've connected to the body. But if we try to ruminate and analyze a sensation or an emotion, it's like a dog spinning and trying to grab its tail. It's never ending. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It
Okay.
does. The body has a lot of wisdom, doesn't it?
Sure does.
And to be able to have the skill to tune in and listen to it is, it seems weird that we don't have that in this world.
Well, and we don't have it because it hasn't been a priority. And I mean, that's a huge, topic. But if we just think of the simple family system and the school system, right? Like kids go to school and it's so intellectual. It's reading, writing, and arithmetic is, you got to learn your ABCs and learn how to conjugate and learn how to, obviously, reading and writing and doing math. I think that's very important. But there's very little teaching in school of connection. Even now, very few schools have physical education. Like when I went to school, we had physical education every day. An hour of wasn't always the best, but at least we were moving our bodies. And even recess, where kids go out and have their break in the morning for 15 minutes to play on the monkey bars. And even that's being cut out of a lot of schools. And so I think, we're disconnected from our body for a few reasons. One, the trauma, the lack of attunement and knowing how to offer an infant what it needs. But then these systems around us don't value movement and dance and just being silly and playing. That's what kids need. That's what adults need. We need to play and dance. And there's a reason why music moves us and these things. And then we tend to leave it to the end of the day. And then maybe there's no room at the end of the day. And then we forget about it. And then it's months before we've had a dance or expressed ourselves or just been spontaneous with our bodies. So we're in an interesting space, I think, in our human culture right now, because we're recognizing if we don't get embodied, and the research shows this, we will get sick in some ways. It will take a toll on those internal systems that I mentioned previously that the autonomic nervous system governs.
And what you do so Irene has an amazing course. It's called Smart Body, Smart Mind. It's 12 weeks, but you get lifetime access to it. I did it back in 2017 and I still log into that course platform every week, at least, if not a couple of times a week. And I was talking about the movement and the dance. So you have like a huge team there in Smart Body, Smart Mind, who do amazing things. And Elia, is that how you pronounce Elia?
Yeah.
He does amazing like movement classes. And when I was doing them originally, I was thinking, like, number one, these are amazing and they're so potent. And number two, it kind of made me feel sad that, oh my God, like this is so basic. Why don't we all know how to do this? But the exercises are so amazing and so potent. And the ones that you do, I love the first one, the orientation. Like, it's so simple. I was doing it today as well, and just like small movements of the head. The head is really important, isn't it, for orientation? And
100%. Yeah, well, our head carries our main senses, right? Our vision, our smell, our taste, our sound. Obviously, there's the kinesthetic touch, and we need to orient to the world for safety.
Yeah.
You know, anyone knows, well, I hope they know, you cross the street in traffic, what do? You look both ways, you listen, you feel, right? Even if you can't see, you might feel the vibration of a big, lorry truck coming your way. You're gonna orient to that potential threat.
Yeah.
So we need that. That's the other thing that's important, Mary, is sometimes people get not confused, but they don't realize we do need our survival responses, right? If there's a threat, we want to jump away and protect. The key is that we want to come out of that. And so one of the reasons why orienting as a lesson that I teach is so powerful for so many people is it re-teaches a person to actually come back into the environment in a way that isn't about threat.
Right.
But what has occurred, and I'd be curious to know your experience, sometimes someone will start to do the orienting, which is very basic. As you said, it's almost like watching paint dry on a wall. It's so boring.
It's like, good though. I love it though.
Yeah. It's like, what does this have to do with rewiring my nervous system? And I'm like, just give it time. Give it time. But what happens is sometimes people who have had a lot of early trauma will look and be like, I don't want to look there. It's too intense. It's too, like, no, danger was out there. Out there is where my family system was yelling at me. Out there is where the car hit me when I was crossing the street because I wasn't paying attention, because I was in my own dissociation. So we bring up this orienting to reteach it so that we can reteach a person like, it's okay to look, right? It's okay to see. And what can occur is this great big reconnection to the world around them. And there's people who have been meditators for decades, who are even psychotherapists, somatic therapists, people who've done a lot of healing work, and they haven't gone to that simple level of I'm just going to look. But I'm also going to look and I'm going to feel my feet on the floor, because that's another thing that I'll bring in. And it can bring a lot of calm, but it can also show what's underneath the survival stress, right?
Wow. It's so interesting, because that exercise for me, and you frame it very well, like you create a lot of safety. You talk about window of tolerance. You talk about titration. I love that word. That's from Peter Levine, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
I love
that word is technically from organic chemistry.
I know, chemistry.
But then he popularized it for doing little tiny bits of work so that the system isn't overloaded. Because if we overload the system, it can go into deeper survival. So a big part of this sort of work is giving the system enough input that it can take it in, digest it, integrate it, and not get more overwhelmed. And a lot of practices don't honor the slowness that a person needs, even when they're really mature and they've done a lot of stuff. But we have to kind of go back. Like, you would never try to teach a 5-year-old how to read an entire encyclopedia when they're learning how to pronounce.
Yeah.
You would just start with, and 5's too old, but like when you're learning, you apple, the A's, B, bat, C, cat. It's very simple.
Yeah.
And you think it's kind of like, what? Like, I'm a 45-year-old professional. Why do I have to just do these simple things?
Yeah.
But if we're dealing with a nervous system that has risk dysregulation, and that's from when we were really young, it's not that we don't regress back to that baby state, but we're tapping into a part of us that is still quite immature. And that's okay, right? Like it's okay. Yeah. And this is where some of the exercises in SBSM are so simple.
Yeah.
They're not flashy, but they're diving into those deep pieces that we often didn't get when we were young. Right?
Yeah. For me as well.
I'll give you one other example, if that's okay. Like when a baby is just chilling and in an environment that is hopefully safe, they look, they gaze, they see.
Yeah.
And sometimes you think, oh, they're not there. It's possible that they're actually feeling inside, but they're not communicating, they're just sensing. And then they re-engage, they hear a noise, they hear mom's voice, they see the dog, and then they orient.
Yeah.
Right. And so it is this natural process that we have naturally, but it tends to leave us because of stress and all the things that occur. So the course is really reteaching you, a person, how to come back into the body, back into the environment with this lens of the nervous system on board and all these faculties that we should have gotten when we were young, but for many of us, we didn't.
Yeah, that's it. I remember for me when I was doing the orientation exercise in 2017, oh my goodness, I had to stop after 5 minutes or 7 minutes. And then a whole load of grief was coming up.
Yeah.
And it was, because you had presented the course so well, like I wasn't worried about that. I was just going with the flow with that.
Right.
And the same with all the movement, especially Elia's movement exercise. It's so weird because I'd start with it and he'd be there, make sure you hydrate. And then some days I'd be doing it. I do like the first 7 minutes and I would be so thirsty. I'd be drinking a pint of water. And then other days, it would also be maybe grief coming up as well. I was there, oh my God, these are so potent, these exercises. But it felt kind of good. Like I felt I was, releasing all the trauma, getting it out and coming out of freeze. I definitely came out of freeze over those couple of months.
Great. And I like the fact that you mentioned Elia's movement lessons. And then of course, as you know, there's movement lessons that I teach. And the reason why movement, and not just like movement, like going to the gym and doing bicep curls, and those are important too, and walking and keeping our heart healthy.
Yeah.
There's something about the intentional, slower, self-aware movement.
Yeah.
It's important because, again, I always go back to the baby.
Yeah.
A baby learns through their movement. There's a reason why a baby is born and they can't just walk right away like a calf can, or a doe, like, when a baby deer comes out. Our brains are way more sophisticated and our nervous systems are way more sophisticated. And so if we didn't get that opportunity when we were an infant, toddler, to explore and play, like think about, I saw a lot of kittens and puppies growing up in my world, and they play, they're biting each other and fighting and rolling and being silly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And animals in the wild also, they're playing, and we're also mammals, like we're human because of this higher brain. So we need that play. We need that movement exploration. And I find that the difference, I guess you could say, between smart body, there's a reason it's smart body and then smart mind, is the body isn't just in the feelings. It's not just in the emotions, the felt sense. It's also in the movement.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned shame a little while ago,
Yeah.
right? That toxic shame that is in the posture, it's in the cells, it's in the physiology. You have to work with the spine, you have to work with the pelvis, you have to work with the arms, and this feeling of, you know, being able to push and say no, or set a boundary. But if we're collapsed, and if we don't even know we have a spine or a pelvis or hands, because you remember there was hand movement exercises too. It's like these parts of us stay disconnected. So we have to do, not to say that therapy is not useful for certain points, not to say that just a plain meditation where you're noticing sensation isn't useful. But we need to also bring in the body and the movement and play. I got to tell you, Mary, it is hard for a lot of adults to allow themselves to play.
Definitely. Yeah.
It's terrifying.
I know.
Because what if you were that kid that you were playing and you broke something, you know, while you're playing in the living room, and you got screamed at, or you got hit, got thrown into your room, you know, to be punished. You're never going to play again. And that stays with us till we die if we don't work on, oh, that's why I'm afraid to let loose and be a little silly. It's because when I was, and a person might not remember this, but something might say to them cellularly, I don't even know what it means to play, to make a funny face, to be silly, to joke.
Exactly.
And we need that in our healing. It can't just always be serious, right?
I know. As the family scapegoat, we would have grown up in a very serious environment.
Very serious.
And the only laughter that was taking place was laughing at the family scapegoat. Just they were the butt of all the jokes.
Yeah. Making fun of and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and very shaming, shaming. So I want to talk about the kidney, adrenals, and the chemicals. You do brilliant exercises on the kidney, adrenals, and communicating with the kidney, adrenals. And so it's the adrenal gland that sits above the kidney that produces the stress chemicals. And so how does this talk a bit about that in terms of like trauma and how that we keep producing all the stress chemicals because we don't get a break?
No. So if we think back to that fight flight, right? Something bad occurred. There's a threat in the environment. So we want stress chemicals. Like I said, there's a real threat. We want adrenaline to come out to get our heart rate going. So there's a fire, quick, better get out of the house, right? So we need them. But the trouble is let's say there's this proverbial metaphorical fire in our environment all the time, i.e. we're being screamed at, we're being bullied, we're being ridiculed, in this case of the scapegoat. That is also going to produce a stress response, wanting to fight, wanting to flee, feeling stress. So those little glands, those adrenals, will pump out fight flight chemical, will feel the danger. So the danger is felt first.
Right.
Like it's an essence. It's like my husband is a great example. I'm allowed to talk about him. You know, he grew up in not the best family environment, very toxic and abusive. And when he was at home alone, he would be chill, like as a teenager, as a young boy, you know, doing his thing, listening to his music. The moment he heard the garage door open, that's dad's home, right? Because dad parks in the garage. Like his whole system would brace. He would stop having relaxation. So in that case, chances are his adrenals pumping, getting prepared for literally battle.
Wow.
Because if he wasn't the perfect son, he would get yelled at, hit, ridiculed in that way. So imagine that, Mary, over an entire childhood, an entire, maybe in utero, right? Let's say mom was also having her own troubles with her own stress chemistry, because chances are that's going to occur if she or her partner is being like that to their kids. So it's just this constant bathing in stress chemicals. Eventually what occurs is those little adrenals are like, I can't keep producing anymore. Like I'm worn out. And this is where we hear the term burnout. This is where we hear the term adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue. Anyone that has what we would call syndromes of fibromyalgia, autoimmune, chronic pain, chances are those adrenals are worn out because they were fighting, and then they can't fight anymore. And so part of healing that, as you learned in SBSM, is working directly with these stress, we call them the stress organs, or I do. The kidneys and adrenals are one of them. Also the gut, because the gut also will go under tension if it's worried, right? If a little kid is scared, they don't usually say I'm in fear. They don't say I'm in fight, flight. They say my tummy hurts. Right? I have a tummy ache, and it's because there's tension and stress in there. The brain stem, which is high up where the brain meets the spinal cord, that's where our primitive sense is also of danger. If we think about a turtle or even a slug or a snail, they feel you, they retract their head in.
Or when people say the hair on the back of your neck,
it kind of stands up. There's like, oh, something's in the environment that isn't safe. So we go on tension. So working directly with these stress organs, in this case, the adrenals and kidneys, we're essentially helping them know that they can take a break. We don't even say to them, I want you to be safe. That's too much of a leap. Right. It's just like, or it even can be, I know, and when I teach the lesson, I'll say, these little guys, I don't know why they're masculine, but they are. Well, I guess hormone, like they're stress chemicals, they're guards, right? Like they've got that masculine energy. Like, you've been working hard since you were conceived. Let's acknowledge that. And even just that alone can bring grief and tears up. And it's like, wow, someone's acknowledging that I've been working so hard to protect. So that's one layer. And then the next layers would be, let's just put attention. Kind of like if a kid is scared, sometimes you don't have to fix anything. They just want to be held, or they just want to be listened to. So we're essentially teaching ourselves to go into these organ spaces that are biological, that are hormonal, that are threat-based. And we're kind of like taming them down and saying, hey, you don't need to always be alert. And what happens often is if someone has been an alert and like broken down for so long, they might start to feel these organs start to chill a bit. But then sometimes there's a rebound, like, oh, no, I can't let my guard down. I got to keep it up. And this will be something. This is like the healing process that nobody likes to talk about, which is, as you go on this journey, you will have little blips where you feel like you're going backwards because you might be feeling more anxiety. You might be feeling a bit of a push of this is too much. And that's because the system it isn't used to being safe. So the moment you start helping these stress organs calm a bit, settle a bit, recover a little bit. Excuse me, the system's like, okay, I better go like do 10 loads of laundry because this is too calm. I need to get my sympathetic up again. And this is part of the dance of okay, well, maybe just do 1 load of laundry, not 10, and allow that sympathetic to be felt, but then rest. And I think a big part of working with these stress organs is we have to also honor their capacity to take their guard off, because it can be too much to say to someone, you need to just totally chill out and not worry. It's like, well, I've been worrying my whole life about protecting myself. I can't just take off that shell and let it be gone. The physiology has to catch up, and the behavior has to catch up, and the mind and the emotions have to catch up. So I do know from working with the kidney adrenals with people in practice and through students in the online world, it really is this game changer, because we're not trying to fix the trauma. We're not trying to, figure out how to, forgive and it's just, we're just working with your physiology.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. I loved that one in particular. It was brilliant for me.
Yes.
And as you say, it's all about titration again and window of tolerance, staying within your window of tolerance and knowing about that as you do the exercises yourself at home, which is, I think, what I was able to do. So it worked well for me. And there's lots of support in the course anyway.
Yes, we have good people there answering questions and keeping things moving for folks who aren't sure, who need a little support, a little guidance. Yeah, it's definitely a really good supportive online format, obviously.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you so much. It's been just a wealth of information there. And let me just see what questions. You've talked about it, but what are the benefits of smart body, smart mind for specifically somebody who grew up being bullied by their parents? Because that would be complex childhood trauma.
Yes. If I just go back really simple, if you grew up in an environment that was unsafe, which is this, right? Where there is this constant threat from the outside, where no one can be trusted, right? That's usually what it would be. I can't trust the situation. It's a dangerous place. And I'm all alone, right? It's usually that. Those are the three big whammies, right? The world's a dangerous place. No one can be trusted, and I'm all alone. And I have to do everything myself. That's another one that can come. I can see your eyes like,
yeah.
And that can,
independence.
Yeah, and that can serve us. It can make us such that we know how to take care of ourselves and make money and put food on the table. Really important things. So we don't want to lose those things. But the system has been taxed. It has been living in probably fight, flight, and freeze to survive. And a lot of toxic shame comes with this, a lot of stored anger, right? Grief, like stuff is suppressed. And so smart body, smart mind, it gets right to that core of the body system that is holding these survival responses. So like I said, we're not just thinking about our traumas. Actually, there's no point in the course, if you can recall, where I ask anyone what their trauma is. It's completely neutral, which is interesting because often people think, oh, I got to dig into the suitcase and pull out all the things. It's like, if you want to share in our forums what occurred to you, that's free. You can feel free. But if you just want to be anonymous in that, that's fine too. And so we're working at restoring that interoception that I mentioned, the perception of the inside, the perception of the outside, that neuroception. You're learning. So education is so important because a lot of people might think, why do I have to learn about the science of the nervous system? And the reason why is because of our higher brains. It helps to have meaning. So let's say one day a person does the orienting lesson. And the first time they actually felt quite relaxed and it actually helps them, we could say, calm. And then the next time they're feeling more anger or more fidgety. And if they don't get the information as to why that is occurring, a person might think, they might go back into that cycle of, okay, there's something wrong with me. I'm doing this wrong. And so by having that education, it helps a person understand the complexity of what they're dealing with. And it makes it such that everything is just a little more okay. So education is super important for an individual that was brought up in that environment. The other thing too that happens, Mary, is people start to realize, okay, that's why I had trouble in school. My brain was shut off because my survival mechanisms were just on complete alert all the time. So no wonder why I couldn't focus. No wonder why I couldn't get out of bed.
Yeah.
Right. No wonder why I turned to being into drugs and things to just get my kind of energy out, or things that kids do that are risky.
Yeah.
These sorts of things.
Yeah.
So
and then we can have compassion for ourselves.
Yes.
With that.
It's like, oh, that's why I was doing all those things. That's why I was smoking cigarettes at age 10. I was trying to calm myself down.
Yeah.
That's why I was stealing things from the grocery store. I needed to get some mischief out of me because I had to be so good at home.
Yeah.
Right. And so we start to uncover behavior that we did, and it makes more sense. And then, as a general, we could say, way to wrap up, how SBSM, Smart Body, Smart Mind, can help. It's designed to teach a person how to gain more regulation and more capacity and more embodiment. And those things by default eventually heal the trauma versus, okay, let's try to heal the trauma. We actually do it opposite. We go back to like, what would a baby do? A baby's just going to learn how to be with their bodies. A baby's going to follow their impulses. A baby's going to move their body. And so we're kind of going back to those root core processes. And I mean, you experienced this from what I can tell, that eventually builds the capacity so that these old things start to come out. The grief starts to come out. The anger starts to come out more naturally rather than trying to force it out of the system.
Yeah. A nice organic process.
You got it.
Yeah. And it definitely was pivotal in my recovery journey.
Wonderful.
And just a little bit on logistics, because you do a live round and it's starting in September for anybody who's listening to this in time.
Yes. Yeah. So our registration for this season is September 12th to the 19th. Just for 1 week.
Do you do education on your social media during that time? You
100%.
Post loads of stuff online, education for free.
You got it. We're going to do some YouTube lives. Obviously, if a person just goes to the site, my site at any time, there's tons of education there. Obviously, my YouTube channel has way too many videos, but
huge amount.
They're all there. My site has free resources. And then, yes, while we're in registration, we'll be doing a bit more outreach. We'll be a bit more active answering questions. And then the proper course begins on, I believe it's the 24th of September. It's a Sunday. And then we go for, it's more than 12 weeks because we have some break weeks right into kind of December. And then the thing that people need to know is it's not about finishing it in 12 weeks. I haven't met anyone yet that has completed every single lesson in 12 weeks. It takes a few rounds to go through, and it's designed so that you go at your own pace. There's no, report card if you don't finish a thing. It's really self-led adult learning, which also challenges our things, right? Because there's many people that feel like they fall behind and then they stop because they feel terrible. And I'll just say that right now, like, it's really important to try to move out of that mentality of I'm behind, I'm not good at this. It's like, no. It's about slow learning, taking your time, and kind of coming back to that natural essence of how we should learn, which isn't forced and has no time constraint. Right. And that's why we allow people to keep the material and come back and repeat, as you know, as many times as they
lifetime
wish.
access to it. So they can join in at other rounds.
You got it. Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, all very, very exciting, Irene. And thank you so much for your time today, sharing all your expertise and your knowledge and the education on the nervous system. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Mary.